Welcome to Ideagen TV. We're especially thrilled today to have with us the Greek Minister of Tourism, Haris Theoharis. Mr. Minister, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. George, this is always a pleasure speaking to you and our people watching us.
Well, thank you. This is an exciting moment to have an update from you, Mr. Minister. I know, first I want to commend all the work that you're doing, that your administration is doing in Greece through this very, very, unprecedented time. It's an unprecedented time. As a Greek American as well, I want to give you a shout out to say we're very proud of you as part of the Homogenia here in the United States, and for folks around the world that are watching to Greece for the leadership during this time. And I'd like to ask you, how has Greece held up during this global pandemic? And how have the results perhaps in some ways exceeded your expectations as Minister of Tourism?
Yes, indeed. I mean, this has been a very stressful and difficult time for all countries and all peoples. So what we tried to do is to heed the warnings of the experts early on. Our Prime Minister was very, very decisive, took a tough stance, tough, difficult decisions early on when those decisions were not obvious like they are now in hindsight. And then he gave us the whistleblower, as it were, the mark to start on this journey to ensure that the whole of the government is effective against this pandemic. But the final ingredient in this recipe is the most important one, and this is the Greek people's determination to see this in a responsible manner, to adhere to the rules, to listen to the experts, to monitor and keep this social distancing, the personal hygienic rules, etc., etc. So this triptych of ingredients allowed us to move and be so effective. And this is the same ingredients that we were going to use in this post-lockdown phase, the phase where we gradually open our economy to the outside world, albeit with a vigilance on the health front.
Well, that's right. And you can see that vigilance. And again, I'd like to express our gratitude in terms of the leadership that's coming out of Greece for enduring this incredibly difficult, as you said, moment. As the borders begin to open and the country, Greece specifically, begins to open, and you're the Minister of Tourism, so it's a big responsibility, and even more so for Greece with the focus on tourism. I mean, if you look at, the bucket list for people all over the world, and you say, what is the place you'd like to go one day? Greece is always at the top of the list. So with all of that, what do you see as your main priority for, tourism this year?
Well, we have reached a stage where the country is open. We're open not to every country and not without rules and regulations, but we are open, ready to receive mainly visitors from Europe and from some countries outside Europe. So this is a big, big milestone. It's a big mission accomplished sign behind in the background of the country. Because this was not an easy task. It required a lot of coordination. It required a lot of work on a European level and on a national level to ensure that this came about. And now that we accomplished that, we have no time to celebrate. We have to move on to ensure that the first weeks of implementation of this opening do not throw us off balance, do not push us to lose control of the situation. We've proved that we can keep control on the way in, on the lockdown phase. We have proved that we can keep control on the internal gradual lifting of the restrictions. And now we're about to prove, as I'm very confident that we're going to prove, that we can open our external borders and still keep control. Now, if we do that, then I think the next steps for Greek tourism, both in terms of the late finish of the current year, but mainly the build-up to the next years, will be very, very successful. So this is not the time to concentrate on numbers. This is the time to concentrate on quality and on operational excellence.
Yeah, and I like that you said that. I really like I like the way you are in the entire administration there are looking at efficiencies. And you know, we talk to a lot of people each and every day, global CEOs, diplomats, leaders like yourself, NGO leaders, and you know, it's been striking to hear how innovation has in certain areas accelerated. Innovation, efficiency, and you know, the most important thing, resiliency. The resiliency of the Greek people in this face of this pandemic has been remarkable, and I think that you're emblematic of that. You're an example of the resiliency that the country continues, even though we're in, you know, the midst of all of this. You are moving forward in a very clear, in a very concise way, you know, basing your decisions on science, of course, but at the same time, you know, accelerating that innovation and efficiency, as you said. So that is remarkable, because you can harness what is really a global, you know, issue for the good in some ways, right?
Yes, of course. I mean, you cannot enter a crisis and come out of it the same person that you entered in, especially if it's a crisis of the kind of proportions that this pandemic has. And I think the name of the game is innovation, as you said, and collaboration. I'll give you an example. We have instituted a special algorithm, and we call people to complete a PFL form, which is you know, a locator form, to allow us to use this algorithm and target our testing to where exactly it's needed. Now, this algorithm was developed by Greek scientists of diaspora, actually working in Harvard University. So it's a Greek-American collaboration, and it's in the forefront of innovation of how countries will deal with the opening of their borders. I'm certain that our experience will be a case study for people that want to learn lessons out of this crisis.
That's right, and utilizing that technology and that innovation. You mentioned the algorithm. I mean, that's incredible to be able to look forward in a way that that allows for you to look around the corner, to be able to prepare for that post-pandemic world that's, you know, by all accounts, moving forward in terms of the vaccine development with so many different companies and so many different countries leading up those efforts. We're all extremely hopeful at this point that we can see maybe a glimpse of light and look forward to a day not in the so distant future where we can, you know, say it's normal. And now we talk about the new normal. You know, you hear that a lot. What's the new normal? Well, your hope is probably that the new normal would be more people traveling to Greece after the pandemic, which I think, you know, by all accounts, may be the case, right? Once we get past this, although there will be a diligence in terms of hand washing and, you know, being careful not to spread, if you're not feeling well, illness, which should have been the case anyway. I think there's an opportunity for you to really gain momentum beyond where you were even last year. Would you say that's the case?
Well, of course, we will try to exploit every opportunity. This crisis has allowed Greece to reintroduce itself to the world as a professional, effective nation, a nation that has strong institutions, and a nation that has a strong health system, which is actually stronger now than what it was in January when we entered the crisis. We have doubled the number of ICUs available for use. I mean, we currently use a single-digit number of ICUs for COVID patients, and we have more than 1,000 of those ICUs. So it's a safe country to the benefit of our people and to the benefit of anyone coming to Greece, it allows us to provide the kind of healthcare that they might need at no cost to the traveler. So if you like, this has allowed us to find a new sense of pride and a new sense of assertiveness, if you like, that we are able to stand on our 2 feet and solve problems in a much better way than others.
That's right. And so what have you encountered? Are there any examples of challenges, perhaps even unexpected? Of course, there are probably many that you've encountered and perhaps overcome in the past several months.
Well, the challenges are too numerous to explain in a few minutes, but I think the biggest challenge has been the biggest problem that we have in the public administration, which is coordination and cooperation. This pandemic required, especially in the tourism sector, the reopening, required talking to the foreign office, talking to people in, scientists, health experts, talking to people from the Ministry of Health, from the Ministry of Civil Protection, which is tasked with dealing with the control of the borders, and of course the private sector as well, that has to deal with all those protocols and ensuring that those protocols make sense and they understand them. The educational institutions that help train everyone in their use. So many aspects, and the degree of complexity is unheard of. And I think we found a new ways to cooperate more efficiently. And this is, I hope, a long-lasting legacy of this crisis.
Well, that's another area that you talk about, and it's no different anywhere else in the world, quite frankly, as you've seen, in terms of coordination, interagency coordination, intergovernmental coordination. And then what I really like that you mentioned a little bit earlier was the whole notion of collaboration, because that's where we live at Ideagen. We convene companies, NGOs, public sector, and I know you're a big fan of that. And it's very important because those countries, those entities that survive through things like we're going through now are those that perhaps were prepared with these relationships, with these partnerships that were created before the pandemic, for example, because it's very difficult to begin new relationships in the middle of a pandemic, to begin to understand what resources companies have, for example, in Greece, that can help during a pandemic or whatever it may be. So when you have this cross-sector collaboration, it's very easy or not as difficult for you to pick up the phone as Minister of Tourism or anyone else in the government to say, I understand what you do, we need your help, let's work together, as opposed to another conversation, which would be, tell me what you do, help me understand what you do, let's figure out a way to work together. It's a much different conversation. And so having that, being on the ground, having those relationships when it's not an urgent moment is absolutely critical. And I know you all have worked really hard to do that before the pandemic. So that benefited Greece in ways that I think we're now seeing the outcomes in terms of how you've weathered this incredible storm that we've all gone through. So I applaud you there. And because not everyone, especially in government, espouses collaboration, especially cross-sector.
Yeah.
So, public and private partnerships.
Yeah, this is a problem that every government faces. Perhaps in Greece a bit more acute, but we found a way, as I said before, to overcome it. Let's hope that this will be a lasting way. This is certainly our intention.
Well, it seems as it will be. And shifting a bit, a few months ago, we were focused on, it was, the beginning of 2020, who knew that a few short months later, the entire planet would be involved in battling an enemy, an invisible enemy, this virus, this pandemic virus here. And at the same time, we were looking at achieving the global goals, those 17 goals of the UN that Greece is so supportive of. as is the EU, and of course the United States. And I'd like your perspective on that. What advice, what three key pieces of advice would you provide as Minister of Tourism? You're sitting in one of the most important offices in Greece because the economy is so dependent on tourism. What would you provide as advice to help achieve these 17 sustainable development goals that clearly overlap with your work each and every day?
Well, the first advice is to keep the strategic goals in mind. Especially during a time of crisis, it's easy to let go of strategy and focus on tactics. So we should do that. Counteract this instinct that we all have, because the pressure of the tactical goals is huge, because the problem is very acute. So find a way to mesh the strategic goals into the day-to-day decisions. The second piece of advice is that use the needs of the crisis to advance those goals. For example, inclusivity, one of the goals, is very, very important because the crisis now affects everyone. So design policies to counteract the crisis, but do that in a way that furthers those goals. And perhaps the third piece of advice is to find the time to, as soon as you sort of reach a milestone and achieve, find the time to sit down and think more long term. We need to have this long-term perspective if we are to be able to look into those goals, because those are not goals for the next month or the next 3 months. Those are goals for the next few years. So take a breath and have the long-term perspective in your mind.
That's incredible advice, Mr. Minister, because, I think the other thing, and you've seen it in Greece, and we've seen it certainly in the United States, is that the pandemic has exposed areas of inequality. It's a very big issue really around the world. And at Ideagen, we've talked about it for a very long time. Empowering individuals to have access to education, quality healthcare, be able to start a business, to be able to, have access, which is called equity. Not necessarily, it's a little bit different than equality. Equity means that you have access and are able to utilize these key tools, as opposed to just equality, having it available, but having really no access. So there's an opportunity now for that to be a legacy, as you mentioned, an incredible legacy of what is happening. Broadband, giving everyone access to the internet so that they can, work from home in this gig economy, to be able to, as you mentioned, work on algorithms literally from their home if they can, to be able to, become empowered in so many different ways. And so I think that's incredible and remarkable that you and the government in Greece are looking at ways to create a more level playing field for all of the citizens of Greece in light of what's happening. Instead of just addressing the pandemic, you're trying to address systemic issues, as we are here in the United States, of course. And so that's an incredible legacy. If that's what comes out of this, if that's the only thing that comes out of the pandemic, then something good has come out of it. Looking to 2021, which we all are, in what we are all hoping will be a post-pandemic world. We hear about all the work on vaccines. We hear about all the promise that's happening. What will your priorities look like for next year? And how, we've touched upon this a little bit, but how do you see tourism becoming different next year and in the decade to come?
Well, the first part of the question, in terms of the priorities, of course, the immediate priority will be to rehabilitate the tourism industry of Greece, to bring the revenue, because at the end, that's what supports jobs, and that's what supports equity and the SDGs. So bring the revenue back to a level that can sustain the Greek economy and the Greek tourism industry. Of course, At the same time, we need to look at the trends that will affect tourism. Those trends perhaps were present, but this crisis accelerated them. So enhancing the experience, making it slower, making it more meaningful, perhaps more authentic. Those are the trends that I feel we all will experience more and more as a need of the customer, because this crisis, I think, has forced us all to take a deep look into what is actually essential and what's superficial. And I think we will seek that in our lives in all its aspects, and especially the traveling aspect of our lives.
That's right. And that's an incredibly insightful look at the future. We're all hopeful. And with leadership like yours and like that of Prime Minister Mitsotakis and your whole administration, I think there's a glimmer of hope, certainly for Greece. And that is a shining light for others to model these efficiencies, just the incredible optimism that you have provided through the government to the people of Greece to help get through this. And so I mentioned leadership, and I know leadership is important for you. It's a very important element of what you do each and every day. And so, especially at this time, if you were to go back to when you first started in your career, what bit of advice would you provide to your younger self, and why?
Well, that's a difficult question, but it's an interesting one as well. I guess those two go hand in hand. Perhaps I would say slow down. Listen more and open your eyes and gather more from the environment. Watch how more experienced people operate and take that advice. Closer to you, or if you like, in other words, feel a bit less certain about your convictions and take a bit more from other people's convictions. The end result, the merging of those two viewpoints, is always much, much better.
Slow down and listen more. What incredible advice. I probably would have given myself the same advice. So it's an incredible way to conclude this profound and very insightful and inspiring interview. You've inspired me. I know you're going to inspire the millions of people that are watching this series. And what would be, Mr. Theoharis, Minister of Tourism of Greece, what would be your call to action for our global audience?
Well, as we said before, this crisis is forcing everyone to rethink priorities. Let's try to prioritize people, our health, our well-being, over the pure economic goals. The example of Greece shows one thing, that those people that prioritize the economy over health, in the end, have paid a double price, both in terms of number of deaths and health hardship, but also in terms of the economy. In the first quarter of this year, Greece contracted only by 0.9% of its GDP versus 3.2% of the average European country. So even though we moved far quicker than the rest of the economies to lock down our economy, we actually are paying less of an economic price for that good decision. So I think things that we sometimes think are don't go hand in hand, in the end they're actually complementary rather than opposing each other. So let's recognize those counterintuitive truths, and let's follow our instincts more.
That's a great way to conclude. And what is the website? If I were someone sitting, in my home wanting to learn more about Greece and tourism and what the status is and how I can one day visit, where would I go?
You should go to two sites, the more long-term, which is visitgreece.com, but also we have a site to give you more information about this specific year, which is a different year than the rest, and that's greecehealthfirst.gr, greecehealthfirst.gr, and that gives you a lot of information about how to come to Greece, as I hope you make the decision to do so.
Mr. Minister, thank you for the inspiration. Thank you for your leadership. And thank you for all you're doing to help shine a light and create solutions with innovation and optimism. My sincere pleasure. Sifakis πάρα πολύ.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the chance to talk again. Thank you.
Thank you.
This copyrighted Ideagen telecast is presented by Ideagen Global. It may not be reproduced, rebroadcasted, or retransmitted in any form without the express written consent of Ideagen Global. The views expressed by guests and guest hosts on Ideagen programming are their own, and their appearance on Ideagen programming does not represent an endorsement of them or any entity they represent.